Good morning. How are you? I'm very, very happy to be here today morning, and I guess it's been exactly about 13 months since I was here last, right? So I usually don't come to Grand Haven, but this feels like homecoming. Thank you. Thank you. Um, I was asked to share a reading, and I thought long and hard about the topic that we have been discussing here, and I really don't have one reading that could share everything. So I didn't give one. What I decided to do instead is speak in honor of two individuals. One is somebody I consider my mentor and my teacher, and another person whose birthday it is today, not me. Tonight's the full moon night. You know that, right? It's about 8:50 p.m. if you want to kind of look out. And people in India are celebrating his birthday, right? I'm talking about a very famous person, but I won't tell you who till about 15 minutes later. Oh, do you want me to? Okay. I wanted to share events from my life with really one message. And it's not even a message, it's common sense. That is, no matter how hard we try to control life, life happens, right? We are not completely in control. And we can either fight that or let it unfold. And the one thing I learned through the mistakes I have made, and I won't tell you what those are, and the sufferings that I have gone through is if we do not get a message out of the situations that we experience, those situations will keep repeating themselves till we get the point. I do not know whether there's some person out there or if it is all impersonal, so rationally speaking, but I know that there is a way, a pattern in which life seems to operate. And at the end of it, we come up with realizations. Now, I want to kind of bracket that and just give a little disclaimer. I'm not here to speak as a professor today. This is not my Grand Valley class. They graduated yesterday, right? My summer just began. And I want to speak as your friend, as an individual who is on the path, searching and finding the meaning of life, um, and kind of speak from my heart, if I have your permission. You know, most kids who grew up in India in the 80s, like me, would tell you this, that your parents said you have the choice of a career, but the choices were you're either a doctor or an engineer, and that's about it. So everybody wanted to be a doctor or an engineer, and there was a third option, though. Sorry, I didn't mention the third option. Go to the United States of America. Why? Because it looks good in Hollywood movies. That's why. All kids want to come here, even if it's for tourism. They just want to see America, right? Um, and if you tell them Mexico is also North America, it's like, really? Really? So that's what I kept hearing when I was growing up. And I went to this school called St. Joseph's College, which is run by Jesuits. And I had the good fortune of meeting Mother Teresa a few times, volunteer at her charity every weekend for a few years. Um, and I was growing up in a Hindu household, going to a Christian school, and there was all shades of religions between, and that's where I started exploring. I started exploring each and every tradition, and I was encouraged to do so. But as I was coming out of school, something interesting happened. Through common friends, I came to know of a person who was looking for a research assistant. Do you know what those are? We're looking for a research assistant in Calcutta, India. And if you're a high schooler, and in India, teenagers don't wait tables, um, you take up a job if you have, right? If you're offered one. And so I said, sure, I'll be a research assistant. What it literally meant is purchasing books, mailing stuff out, and so on and so forth. The person I was working for had a very interesting background. He was Jewish from New York who had become a Hindu monk, had dropped out of school in the 60s and did that whole thing. And then he continued being a monk, but enrolled at Cambridge University to do a PhD. Okay? You talk about the wild, wild, 60s. I got a bit of that through him. And then he was finishing up his PhD, and he was writing on a Hindu devotional teacher, and was looking for materials. And I happened to be in that part of the world, so sure. And those days, internet was new in India. Email was like the latest technology, and you literally had to turn on the modem. Remember those days? And fall asleep. And you would have all these notes, like, right? And you wake up after 15 minutes, like, did this email go? No, try again and go back to sleep. So that's how we were communicating, because email was new. And we exchanged a few emails. I sent him the stuff he needed. And then he said he was coming to India. And I said, I'd love to host you. So here's this individual, New Yorker from the 60s, a Hindu monk on top of that, in my living room in 2001, talking about his life. And then he and I had several conversations. And at that point, as I told you, I had a choice to become a doctor, engineer, go to America, or there was a fourth option. Because a lot of my family were ship captains and marine engineers, go and join the merchant navy. And that looked like a great career prospect. And I'll tell you why. Because if you're in India and you're working for an American company, you are earning in dollars and spending in rupees. I tell you, it's like the best thing ever. You get the best of both worlds. And then you can take about 3 months off a year. You get to travel the world for free. Okay? And it's like, who doesn't want a career in that? I mean, doctor? Who wants to be a doctor? And that evening, around July 23rd or 22nd, 2001, I was sitting with this monk, and I asked him, oh, why did you choose to be that? And he said, I was searching for the meaningless. Like, you could afford to do that, not me. And so that's where our conversation started. We kept going and going, and we were actually talking about the difference between living and making a living. And he said, so he asked me, if you won the lottery today and you had no worries about money, what would you do? I said, I would study the world's religions. Now, back in 2001, this is 2018, I'm 17 years back, I had no clue that one day I'd be a professor teaching the world's religions. I was just out of my teen years, sitting in my living room talking to this monk. And he was saying, you should really do what... And I said, what about, having a career? He said, it will work out. I said, no, it won't. And then I had this brilliant idea that, you know what? I can study the world's religions and get paid for it if I became a monk like him. And so I started living in monasteries on and off whenever I got a break. And I applied to be a monk. Some institutions, you have to fill in paperwork, even to be a monk. And The initiation, whatever ceremony was ready, and I had my saffron clothes ready. I didn't tell at home because people would freak out. These are kind of decisions you tell your parents after you've done it, you know, because I learned the hard way. It's easier to say sorry than to take permission. And I decided that if I ever take the vows of a monk, I'll do it from this person because, he and I kind of had a really good connection. On the morning of my initiation, he called me and said, I heard you're trying to become a monk. I said, yes. I said, no, you can't. I said, but you are a monk. You've been a monk 40 years. He said, I'm telling you, as a monk of 40 years, you shouldn't be a monk. Just blew my mind. It's like, what? So I gave up a potential career in the merchant navy to finally become a monk. And here's a monk who's been a monk for 40 years telling me it's a bad decision. It's like, why? This is the most selfish thing you can do. Whew, never heard of that before. And then he kept telling me that, if you're young, if you just lock yourself up and just, live in a monastery, you're missing out on life. Think about it. What you should do instead is go to school, enroll yourself in um, programs that study the world's religions, get credentials, and teach. Right? Share what you have to share. That's much better than being a monk. I was like, but I'm convinced this is what I should do. And they said, why do you want to be a monk? And I said, I want to renounce, because that's what monks do. They want to renounce. And after you've renounced everything, at least that's what the traditional texts say, you find inner contentment. So I want to renounce. And he said, you know what? And I'll still remember this. He said, I want you to renounce the idea of being renounced. Okay. So I sat for the initiation ceremony, but I did not become a monk. Right? And then this was in July 2001, about August, September, October, November, December, January, February, March. So he was back 8 months later. And we started talking. We went to a place about 100 kilometers north of Calcutta, my hometown. And that was the time he said, maybe you should pursue academics. I said, I'm not an academic. Seriously, I rather run ships or whatever, join my father's business. And he said, you should really sit down, think about, stop worrying about money. Everybody has a few years of hardship, whether figuring out what they want to do, no matter who you're born. And so everybody has to go through that process of trying to figure out what is their life meant for. And you should you should sit down and think about it. It's like, okay, I'll think about it. But I didn't take him seriously. On 15th of March, 2002, I was supposed to ride with him to Calcutta airport. And he was going back to Cambridge to finish and defend his PhD. And I just hit 20 that year. And the night before, he said, somebody else needs to go. I think you should leave tonight. See me at the airport. And I was not happy because, if you have a ride and then somebody tells you at the last minute you don't have a ride anymore, it's like, really? Next morning, I had to kind of oblige. Next morning, I was sitting in Calcutta, getting ready to see him at the airport, and I received this phone call saying that the car that was driving had an accident. The driver was speeding, but also fell asleep on the wheel and smashed on a tree. And my mentor teacher, Tamal Krishna Goswami, had died on the spot. And the lady, and I used to, whenever I rode with him, I used to sit diagonally opposite so I could speak with him. Right? Sometimes 4 people or 6 people in the car, you sit across so you can speak. And I was planning to sit across so I could speak for that 3-hour road trip. But there was another girl from Australia who ended up in that car, and she died that morning. And I was processing all of that, I would have been there. It was like, I don't even know what to say. I would have been there in that car that morning. And that is the first time I actually took my life seriously. And I took what he told me very, very seriously. That living and relishing your life is way more important than just earning a living. It's not that earning a living is unimportant, it's important. But living is way more important. Because I was just out of school in college, and I realized one thing, that when you are in kindergarten, they tell you, you will be, you really want to do well and go to the next grade. When you're in second grade, they tell you need to be in third grade, right? When they're in fifth grade, they tell you need to be in 10th grade. And somehow in your head, you think that once you're in 10th grade, you're all set. And then, high school's over, and then tell you that you need to go to college, right? And I ask this question to my students very often, that the expectation that you had while you were entering college, based on movies, friends, whatever, and the reality of college, do they match up? And 100% of all my students said no. Right? Because once you're in college, you say you got to get a job now, and once you have a job, you got to get married, and once you're married, I didn't have kids for 6 years, and everybody is saying, "Hey, my grandma was telling me you got to go and see a doctor." What's happening? I was like, maybe I'm not ready. He said, "You're never ready, and you never will be. Go see a doctor." Okay, like, okay, grandma. I don't know what to say. But after you have a kid, it's like, all right, now start saving for her college or saving for his college, and save for your retirement, and of course things are different in different countries. Here you have a 401k stuff, and you keep putting money there, and you sit down and you calculate how much you need to put in to have that kind of a life 35 years from now, and it's a big fat ugly math in your head, and then life is slipping by as that happens, right? And it was not till last November. And I don't want to say this because I don't want to say this because I don't want to give the impression that my life has been a series of accidents, but kind of. Last November, I was driving home, 6th November 2017, and there was black ice on the road. You're from Michigan, you know this. Um, I didn't notice, it was late at night. There was a raccoon trying to cross the road, and the person that I am, I've been trained in India to not even kill mosquitoes. I don't, wear leather. I don't kill animals. The vow is to not enjoy or not cause harm, or not enjoy in somebody else's pain, or to not cause harm willingly. So I tried saving the raccoon. Car skid, hit my head, had no consciousness for some time. Right? Um, got dragged out of the car, and so on and so forth. Don't want to get into the gory details. And I started asking that same question that I asked 17 years back, that we are told all the time that you do this and then you'll be happy, and then the next thing happens, the next thing happens, the next thing happens. Like, do I want to postpone my contentment till my retirement? It won't happen. It won't work. And I seriously asked this very simple question: what is the meaning of my life? And to be honest, I haven't found the answer, but I have answers that are satisfactory. And I found them in the works of the teacher that I'm going to talk about today, whose birthday people are celebrating in India. He was called Siddhartha, and later he came to be known as the Buddha. And it is said that he was born and he became the Buddha, that is to wake up, and he died on the same day, on the full moon night of spring. And here is something that he wrote or he spoke um, that has actually become a very useful um, tool for me to think about as I take decisions in life. And I'll read out a very small passage from a text called the Kalama Sutta. The Kalama is a small place in India, and the Buddha used to travel across from village to village, and he came to Kalama. And the people of Kalama asked the Buddha who to believe of all ascetics, sages, venerables, and holy ones who, like himself, passed through their town. They complained they were confused by the many contradictions they discovered in what they heard. The Kalama Sutta, and I am giving a summary, is what the Buddha said. Do not believe in anything just because everybody's talking about it. Do not believe in traditions merely because they are old and have been handed down for many generations and in many places. Do not believe in anything on account of rumors because people talk a great deal about it. Do not believe anything because you are shown the written testimony of some ancient sage. Do not believe in what you have fancied, thinking that because it is extraordinary, it must have been inspired by a god or some other wonderful being. Do not believe anything merely because presumption is in its favor, or because the custom of many years inclines you to take it as true. Do not believe anything merely on the authority of teachers and priests. And here's the most important sentence. But whatever, after thorough, mark these words, investigation and reflection, okay? Two more words that are more important. You find to agree with reason and experience as conducive to the, and now even more important stuff, conducive to the good and benefit of one and all, accept only that as true and shape your life in accordance to it. And there the Buddha said, the same applies to my teachings. Do not believe in it just because I am telling you. Take what you can, apply it in your lives, think about it rationally, see if evidence is in its favor. And last December, I had the good fortune of meeting the 14th Dalai Lama in India. And in the course of many questions and answers, this is something he kept saying, right, in various forums. He says that if you can show me any contradiction between Buddhism and modern science, I think it's time for Buddhism to change. Right? And both these teachers, my teacher that I met and that ancient teacher Gautama Buddha, tells me one simple thing, that if it's very easy to live by a cut and paste set of expectations that people put on you. But the one thing I learned over the years is not to make my happiness, and because I'm in the United States, I'll say soccer ball, not football, not to make my happiness a soccer ball of other people's expectations and opinions. Right? I've learned that the hard way. Not to make my contentment, my satisfaction, my happiness the soccer ball of other people's opinions and expectations. Right? That's, I think, the one thing I have to offer today in terms of living, right? Because I would assume that all of us have some modes or methods of making a living. Um, the fact of life is no matter what we do, we are all going to have difficulties. That's the first noble truth the Buddha taught. There is no escape. We are all going to get older. There is no escape. And I was saying during this conversation today morning that, well, I have resigned to the fact that I'm going to get older, but even though growing old is inevitable, growing up is an option. Growing up, my friends, is an option. There's always going to be that gap between your biological age and your psychological age. And instead of being embarrassed about it, I think we should celebrate it. Because if I really think about the meaning of life, it's like asking this simple question: what's the meaning of the sky? The sky has no meaning. The sky is the sky, right? It's there. You acknowledge it, you accept it. You can breathe. If you're angry at the sky, you spit up, the spit will fall on your face. But if you go out and breathe, the sky will feel beautiful. You don't wait to find, you don't think about it intellectually. It's there, you relish it. And in terms of the meaning of life, the first principle, as I said, not to become a football of other people's opinions. The second thing is to relish it now. And I'm saying this because when I had that accident, for a few seconds, my entire life, kind of flashed in front of my eyes. I'm grateful I'm not dead. I'm not trying to talk about the Grateful Dead. That's not a band. But I'm grateful I'm not dead. Hmm? And this is the one realization I came up with. That is, when I had that first meal after that accident, I didn't say, hey, I'm going to feel good about eating after I have finished eating. You don't feel good about eating. Well, you feel satisfaction, but you don't relish the taste after you're done eating. You relish the taste while you're eating. When you dance, you do not think, I'm going to enjoy this after I finish dancing. You enjoy it while you're dancing. So why is it that when it comes to life itself, we say, save it till the retirement? Why? If you can relish it now without any guarantee for tomorrow, then why say you'll be happier when you get out of college, you'll be happier when you have. And I just wanted to finish with this, that I kind of chose the third option, although I think I might go back to India to retire because it's warmer down there. I can tell you this, that I have lived the American dream, kind of. But unless, like the Buddha said, we become awake, even if we have a whole palace full of whatever we want, because that's what the Buddha had growing up, or even if you become a monk, that's what the Buddha did, you're not going to be satisfied. Neither of these, enjoyment or aversion to the world, is going to lead you anywhere. And that's why in the Hindu and the Buddhist traditions, they give an example. They say that, if you find $100 bill, they don't say $100 bill, if you find $100 bill and you ignore it and move on, right? Then you keep thinking, well, I could have picked it up. Or, I just let that $100 go. If you pick it up and you just spend it on yourself, there's something somewhere, if you have any conscience, it'll tell you that, hey, it wasn't your money. And that's how it is to live in the world. If you give it up like monks do, then you keep regretting it. And I have met enough monks to let you, to know for sure. There are very few who are very content, but many, many monks, they're trying. I respect them for that. But when you give up the world, when you renounce the world, it eats you. When you're constantly enjoying the world, it keeps eating you inside. And so neither in renunciation nor in just mindless enjoyment, those have nothing to do with, according to the Buddha, spiritual awakening. But to be here now and to celebrate the fact that you are alive at this moment. Let's do this. Close your eyes. And if any thoughts come in, just let them go. Take a deep breath in. Breathe out and just focus on your breath. No thoughts, nothing. Just focus on your breath. Slow down, take another deep breath in. And when you're ready, you may slowly open your eyes. Just those two breaths, you see the shift in consciousness, right? Do you see a little difference? When we stop, right, and this is the foundation of yoga, and I'll stop with this. When we stop the myriad fluctuations of the mind, right, we are doing what is called yoga. Yoga chitta vritti nirodha tada drashtuhu sarupe avasthanam vrittir saurupyam itaratra. Sanskrit sutras, which says yoga, yoga is chitta, which is the mind, intelligence, and the ego. Vritti, constant fluctuations. Nirodha, yoga is pausing the constant fluctuations of the mind. Tada, then, drashtuhu, the inner witness. Swarupe avasthanam, starts seeing things from its own true splendor. Vrittir sarupyam itaratra. If you don't do that, you start identifying with the madness of your mind, and then everything feels out of order, not under control, disarrayed, disrupted. And so you may go for a $300,000 vacation somewhere, but if your mind is not taking a vacation, you will come back in the exact same condition that you went. And that, I think, are some of the key fundamentals that the Hindu and the Buddhist traditions have to offer. And that's how it has affected me and inspired me in my life to do the work I do. Thank you very much.